it challenges you and it makes you focus. For some reason, my anxiety just completely disappears when I'm glass blowing, and it's just the most soothing thing ever.
Healing has always been our main focus. Chihuly Heroes came out of a conversation in 2012 between General Brown, who was running JBLM at the time, and Dale Chihuly. Dale had rented out the Museum of Glass for military and their families on President's Day. And it was such an overwhelming success, the General asked, how can we keep this good relationship going? It was suggested that having classes for soldiers would be the best way to go about it, and specifically those soldiers that were getting ready to return to civilian life, the Warrior Transition Battalion. As of last year, we also opened it up to other active duty as well as veterans, and now we are partnering with the American Lake VA to get half of our new students, and the other half come from Warrior Transition Battalion.
I'm Rukia Leek. I'm a private first class in the Army. I joined in May of 2015 and then went to basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. After that, I went to Monterey, California to study Persian Farsi at the Defense Language Institute. While I was at the Defense Language Institute, I ended up getting hurt, and then I developed a neurological condition called conversion disorder. My whole entire right leg just went paralyzed. Like, I literally just woke up and could not feel my right leg. The Army tried their hardest to take care of me, and that's when I got sent up here to Washington for the Warrior Transition Battalion. And obviously I can walk now and I have feeling now, so I'm very fortunate.
Chihuly Heroes is a free program, completely free participants. We are funded by private donors, we're funded by grants, we're funded by foundations that want to provide this service for active and veterans from the military. We start class every night by having dinner. People are coming from different times in the day, different schedules, so we found that having dinner together as a group is the best way to kind of get people grounded and started. And we do have people that have come in on wheelie carts, certainly people on crutches, people that have just got out of surgery, people that are having surgeries concurrent with our classes. So we do have to make it very adaptable for people in all sorts of modalities of being ambulatory or not. This is tremendously emotional work that we're doing. And in terms of how the museum is stretched and grown, that was something that we had no idea of how emotionally impactful this program would be for not only the people involved, but the instructors and the institution as well. And healing has always been our main focus. That part of it hasn't really changed at all. What has changed is our understanding of soldiers' needs, most definitely. What has changed is our understanding of what the community needs in terms of healing and in terms of broader outreach for museums and other institutions like ourselves. And certainly for me personally and with the museum at large, our understanding of how we fit into the larger scheme of healing within the arts and military in the United States.
I'm really big into meditation, and meditation is a mind and soul connection. And I look at glassblowing a lot like meditation, but it's mind, body, and soul. It's very physical, especially if you have a lot of glass at the end of the pipe, but it's also really relaxing. Although it's a lot of hard work because you really have to focus, I think that's why it's relaxing, because you're so focused on the glass and creating this beautiful art form, and you're putting everything you have into it and creating whatever image is in your mind. And so you're completely detached from any stressors from the outside world. You're not worried about politics, you're not worried about, you know, the Army, you're not worried about your future and what may happen after you get out the Army. You're just solely focused on your glass art and your piece and how excited you are for next week to come and see how it turned out. And Wednesdays are like my favorite days. Wednesdays are my Fridays because I get to come and just detach from everything else and it's pretty awesome.
We tattoo artists are creating incredible art using very difficult mediums, and color theory it applies exactly the same as if we're doing oil or acrylic or charcoal pastel, whatever.
I've always actually been interested in tattooing. I've always been interested in the art form itself. My style in the tattoo industry, really at this point, I'm pushing for kind of my take on neo-traditional as well as Japanese work.
Pushing yourself creatively, like I feel that's really important. It's not like your average job where you take something, there's 3 steps to it. Sometimes you might end up planning or like having to meet up with people over the course of like 3 months or something just to get like a small like 5-inch tattoo done.
I like having the really traditional tons of black in work. I love having really thick, bold outlines, really dramatic imagery. And I also like having a ton of color. And it's not exactly the norm for neo-traditional specifically, but it's my version of it. Honestly, if you go back and look at advertising from the 1930s to the 1950s, you're gonna see where that style kind of originated. It's a very graphic, almost cartoony style, but it has really bold line work, simplified colors, really segmented amounts of black, and it's made to last. It's made so that when the color would fall out and things would age, it would still be a readable and legible tattoo.
I'm actually starting to notice a huge amount of women in the tattoo artistry industry come up really fast, and it's actually becoming more overwhelming now because it's not the competition with the guys anymore. It's now also a competition all around, and not really competitive. It just becomes more inspirational to push to do harder and better.
It's more about technique, because every medium that I work with, and I think a lot of artists are like that, like you find certain artists that they lean towards watercolor, and for whatever reason they know how to move that watercolor around, or the watercolor knows how to communicate with them. And with tattooing, I actually found that I'm a stronger artist as working with needles into skin, the machinery behind it. I don't know what it is. I feel it in my bones. I feel the vibration. It's like when you just hit that perfect spot in the skin, you've got the right tension, the skin's taut properly, and you feel that hum.
There's a lot of people that come in here for stuff they see on rock stars or pop stars or rappers. And then there's also people that just want something creative, like they'll come in here and get a memorial piece that means a lot to them.
As far as I don't really get much grief, or I don't really have anyone awkward with me getting tattoos by me. Some guys are actually really excited to be tattooed by females.
I don't believe in being a jack of all trades at all. I believe in being good at what you're good at. And there's elements of tattooing that take a lifetime to learn. And stuff like drawing up traditional Polynesian tribal tattoos, that goes back cultures, that goes back years and years. That's information that's handed down from father to son. And I can't match that in a 5-minute search on Google.
Well, anything hateful, anything that that we don't advocate. You know, if someone comes in here and straight wants a Nazi flag, we're gonna be like, we're not doing that. If anybody comes in here and wants something really dumb, then you know, we'll tell them that's a dumb idea. One of those things would be your girlfriend's name. You don't get your girlfriend's name. Everybody knows that's a really bad idea because it's not your girlfriend's name, it's your ex-girlfriend's name that you're getting. And it's just like, I mean, it's more business for us because we get a cover-up, but who wants to do a cover-up when you can make a beautiful piece of art, you know? Like, that's not really why we're here. We're here to make cool things that make people, you know, look twice and say, wow, who did that?
Tattoo artists are the first people walking the planet Earth right now that are free to express themselves and make a good freaking fire trucking living. And I'm grateful and I feel challenged by every time I see some 23-year-old come out who's been tattooing for a year and he blows me out of the water. I'm like, I'm going after him next. That's the challenge. And every piece I do better be the best damn thing I've ever done in my life because I could die tomorrow and you're only as good as the last thing you did.
So my name is Fleites-Lear, and I am a flamenco dancer and instructor. Flamenco is an art form that is extremely complicated, attached historically to the gypsies in the southern part of Spain. It is a body of music, dance, and singing that encompasses a huge variety of rhythms. They are all counted differently. Therefore, the dancer has to be really a musician. He has to know, understand rhythm in a way that other dance forms do not require as much. A dancer has to have a very strong connection with the musicians, with the singers, so that it all works out. So we are today at the YMCA. There are 3 branches of the YMCA in Tacoma. I've been a member since early 1990s. Taking care of my body is very important because with the strong demands of flamenco, which is a very, very complicated, strong art form that requires being fit, the Y offered the opportunity to, one, take care of my body, also take care of my soul, because it was one of the first places where I encountered in Tacoma back in the 1990s a very diverse population and a very tolerant, accepting population for people that look like me, right? And there were not many people that looked like me in Tacoma back in 1992. All flamenco dancers are also choreographers, since the choreographies in flamenco are personal choreographies, they're not set. So I'm constantly listening to music, trying to select music for my pieces, but I also observe how people move. When I'm in class here, I'm observing, so sometimes the instructor will give me an idea just by, I don't know, doing something like this, right? It gives me an idea that I can do something like this. So you get ideas from looking at people moving, but also I'm thinking, is the one space where I don't have to take care of anyone. I'm not teaching, I'm not working, right? So it's really a safe, mentally safe space to think about my dancing.
Good evening and welcome to this performance of this world premiere production of Fiery Jade, Cyan. by John R. and Gregory Utes.
Cai Yan is a legendary Chinese poet from Han Dynasty, 1,800 years ago. She left us with a long autobiographical poetry and the fragments of historical record of her time.
The character Cai Yan is very famous in China. She was the daughter of a prime minister, and she was abducted by an invading Mongolian army, married a Xiongnu Mongolian prince up there, had 2 children. After about 12 years was then ransomed back to China, having to leave her kids behind. Was married a 3rd time to another Chinese court nobleman who was sentenced to die. And she went to the new king's court, barefoot, in rags, and pled for her husband's life.
China has such a long history of poetry. We have so many thousands of poets that has work collected and passed on. But among those thousands of poets, 1 or 2 are women, and Cai Yan is one of them. First time I met Greg, he gave samplers of his music based on another female Chinese poet, lesser known. And most Chinese poetry, mainstream, don't take her seriously. And but the fact that Greg, among all these famous Chinese poets, chose a woman courtesan's work to compose music was really struck me as something like a kindred spirit, someone who recognized the female voice importance, which is really lacking from the narratives of the Chinese narratives. I write poetry in Chinese, and I have a couple of books published in Chinese, and then selected work has been translated into English. In this particular libretto, I write directly in English. It creates some interesting challenges for me as a writer, as a poet, and I used all what I have as a poet, the past training experience, into the writing of Cai Yan's story. How you create narrative lines, but in the meantime poetic, that's something I think this libretto allowed me to explore. Cai Yan can say, oh, the grass is seeding, the winter is ending, but how does that become poetry rather than just a plain talking? So, I mean, and that is also part of the music into it. So I have to allow the word to be empty enough so it can be taken up by music.
I was faced with really 3 cultures that I needed to somehow illuminate and bring to life musically. The first, of course, is Han Chinese, the court, the culture from which Cai Yan came. The second is the Xiongnu people, essentially what is now Mongolia. And they were nomadic, herding people, not palace town people like the Han Chinese. And the third culture is Buddhist culture, sort of pan-Asian Buddhist culture, which of course came from India over the Silk Road down into China just about the time that this was taking place. Buddhism was a brand new religion in China. So what was really challenging and fun for me was to figure out how to create 3 different musical languages that would represent characters in these 3 different cultures. The thing which Western audiences probably know most about Mongolian music today is in fact what's called overtone singing. So you have this sort of a low drone going, and the same human being, while singing that low drone, is also producing what we call overtones by sort of shaping their mouth in different ways, and they're literally singing these tunes up in these little high sort of bell-like sounds while this sort of fuller drone is going on. So this is quite well known. People know the name of a particular area called Tuva now. Tuvan overtone singing has become quite well known in Europe and the US. The tunes that are used in the Mongolian scene, the Xiongnu scene, are mostly based on the notes that are available harmonically in overtones. And that gives them a really different sound than the sort of Han court music. For the Buddhist music, I listen to a lot of Indian ragas. And I'm aware of the fact that that's kind of a stretch, but the fact is we know really nothing about what Indian music or Buddhist music might have sounded like 1800 years ago. To at least acknowledge India as the source, and I listen to a lot of different ragas, which are scales and sort of song performance traditions, you could say, based on pitches. I listen to a lot of these, which again provided both a very different musical sound and also it seems somehow appropriate to me. This opera gave me the opportunity to pull together all the things that I have experimented with over 25 years of allowing China to influence my music. There's a particular very traditional special Chinese instrument called guqin. The main character plays this instrument, so how are you going to do that musically? It was one of the experiments that I probably 20 years ago I had faced before. I wanted to emulate the sound of this Chinese instrument but using Western instruments. So I had discovered at the time that using a harp and a cello worked very well. And the cello puts down his or her bow and pizzicatos, meaning plucks the string, and then slides, so you get this sort of boing. And then the harp plucks the string, and that sounds like the open string of a guqin being played. So you get this bong that rings very well, and then you get boing, bong, bong. It is really quite magical.
Writing this piece is really using a Western lens to look at the Chinese culture. The fact that I choose a single woman to write this period of history is, I would say, Western feminist perspective. In Chinese culture, we are very patriarchy and very collective. You will never talk about history from one person's perspective, say nothing of a woman's perspective. And so I think for me that is already a kind of appropriation, I would say, of a Chinese culture to the Western audience, because that's a Western angle. Look at individuals, how they fare in this the grand scheme of things.
The musical language is Western music with a lot of Chinese references. Probably far more Chinese references than 90% of the audience would ever know. There's all kinds of sort of subtle things in there. But, you know, opera is a big, broad, bold, public medium. Mm-hmm. It's not private, esoteric chamber music or something. You know, it's a big public art form. And so the music is Western in the sense that we all grow up in our culture learning sort of the musical symbolism. A dissonant chord means tension or anxiety or fear or something, and beautiful, calm consonance means the opposite. So I'm using that kind of musical grammar. The director, Jim Brown, had a really fabulous idea, and that was that we should have an actual Chinese traditional flutist as part of this production. And she was the scene change music. But she practically stole the show, because the music that she played was so perfectly chosen and played so powerfully. And she played probably 5 or so different sizes of one particular flute. It's a bamboo flute with a kind of a membrane over it that buzzes. It's almost like a kazoo, right? Sort of kazoo flute. And it's got a kind of a sharp sound to it. And it's very expressive. And then she also played a vertical bamboo flute without the membrane, so it just sounds like a very mellow bamboo flute. And then she played a kind of a, it's like sort of like an ocarina. It's a sort of a clay cup thing that you blow across the top of, like blowing into a bottle, and you can finger it. And it's famously used in Chinese music for signs of great weeping, distress, sorrow. The audience was so bewitched by this music that they weren't paying any attention at all to the staging that was going on. It was so wonderful.
I'm very proud of the whole process. I feel at the end of it, it doesn't feel like just my work. every single artist involved with the project. Greg, of course, is, as a composer, is a major, really control how the piece turns out. And then we have Jim Brown, who is the stage director and conductor for the orchestra, and all the students on the stage, the staff who did the theater, the costume designs, the makeup designs, and teamwork works. And it's more than what I can eventually, 5 years ago, I would never think it's going to come out this way. But it is collective dream and collective work. Very proud.
I'm Nick Stokes, and I'm a writer, and I write fiction and novels and theater pieces, and playwright. We're at Owen Beach, Point Defiance Park, and this is a place I come to often every few weeks to ground myself, I think, and find a little bit of peace of mind and walk, and I bring my kids here, my dog here. Yeah, and it centers me. There's a lot of walking to be done here and exploring. It's a more natural kind of landscape than some of the beaches around Tacoma, and I like to walk as far as we can and go down all the way to the point. The tide's low. There's woods here that we explore in. There's lots of wildlife, seals, bald eagles. We come here in the middle of the week, and a lot of times there's not a lot of people, so it's pretty peaceful. And in the summertime, we come swim, and there's a lot of people. It has appeared in some of my work, kind of abstracted and not by name. One of my novels is used as a set piece, I guess. There's a lot of the natural world in what I write, so I think just the environment and being outside creeps into my work all the time. It's pretty important to me. Both in fiction, novels, and theater, I think it's all a little bit abstract. I don't usually work in realism or naturalism, I guess, so it's stylized. Often find myself, especially in theater, writing people who are inside and want to get outside, who are trapped or stuck or can't escape their situation and want to get out. So I think I guess that's one thing that exemplifies my relationship to this kind of place. There's certainly times where I've had ideas here that I've used, but I think when I come here, it's mostly to empty my mind and let everything go and have some peace. And I think that feeds me in other areas, then that I'm able to go back to writing or daily life and cope with it better.
My story is entitled The True Story of Balaam's Ass. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the biblical story of Balaam's ass, but there's a behind the scenes that you might be interested in.
Creative Colloquy is a community of writers in the South Sound that meet, not necessarily, it's not a membership or anything like that. We meet because we want to. It's open to everybody, but it's about creating that sense of community through storytelling.
The king was a nasty, brutish man with intense body odor, a bad temper, and abundance of cowardice.
The mission statement was essentially we were going to foster relationships based on the mutual admiration of the written word. That was kind of our thing. That was our tagline.
You're making me look bad, I swear. If I had a sword right now, I'd do you in.
We try to cultivate a welcoming space for anyone that wants to share their stories, and that's what we've been doing. I mean, it's been pretty amazing.
Kind of about how when you're young and you're trying to outrun your childhood and where you came from, and then you get somewhere and you're like, how did I get here? Is this the journey I'm really on? Like,
each one of our readings start with 5 featured readers that have been featured on the website, but then it opens up to open mic as well. And we really do allow almost anything to happen. We've had people rap, We've had people give political speeches.
We've had performance
We've
type
had
pieces.
comedy pieces. Just walk up there and people do stand-up for 5
have.
minutes, and just it's an open mic situation. But it's about, again, it's about bringing that community together and people sharing personal stories and community stories to create our, regional stories to create that community.
Yeah. My grandmothers were immigrants, one Irish and the other so Mexican. Her father pushed the family north along flattened cattle trails.
I worked as an editor for a magazine that was around for about 8 months. And although it didn't last that long, we had started doing readings and everyone felt like, wouldn't it be cool if we had this, opportunity to read? Wouldn't it be cool if we had an opportunity to share our work and have a platform, especially for short stories, I think.
Right, we saw how it worked once with a very fleeting situation. And we realized that we need that venue. That needed to continue in some fashion.
I stood up, brushed the sand from my trousers, and made my leave with a guilty clip.
So we talked about it for a long time before it actually happened. And at that first reading in March of 2014, there's about 60 people.
Yeah, it's about that many.
It was just a room full of people. I didn't know most of them. I was really kind of like, it was pretty obvious that everyone else was filling that void that we were hoping to fill. So it was just right out of the gates, pretty rewarding.
Cece's whole thing is inclusivity.
South Sound, it's amazing how many people just keep coming, and
just
every month we find new people that just show up.
New people constantly.
Oh, I heard about you through a friend, or I saw you online, and we didn't even know these people were there. Like, how did they all come up? We thought we knew everybody. That was the thing. Like, we started just inviting. We just started inviting our friends, and as we've grown and as we've just stayed around, the longevity of it, people have become accustomed to us being there. So they show up, and again, every month I see new people.
She'd had a little dog once, a little white dog who had stayed by her side for 12 years.
Writing is a very solitary art, but to know that you're not alone creates a sort of power behind it, to know that there's other people.
And I think it fuels inspiration on top of that. I mean, you can come as a writer not to share your work, but hear other people's stories. And like a story can move through you and click, and you go home and produce something based off of something that you heard.
Let out a howl that she had never heard from the little creature before.
It's nice to kind of crawl out from out and feel like you can share that. Feel like, because it's a very vulnerable thing, I think, to come out and be like, okay, I'm bearing my soul to you. And to feel comfortable doing that, I think is, powerful and magical, and what we aim to do is kind of have that welcoming space for people.
So she had known then, and she'd known forever, and she would know always. Now, clean.
To have that venue where you're celebrating that raw nerve of personal expression, and then just giving the people a stage to do that, and allowing them to meet the other people like themselves, it's wonderful to watch.